Welcome back to the podcast, mates. How are you all going? This episode is with Bjorn Persson, who is a Swedish fine art photographer, trained anti-poacher, passionate wildlife conservationist, and chairman of Smart Savannahs, which is a Swedish Kenyan non-profit organization that is developing both the hardware and the software that could potentially curtail poaching in some of the big game parks of Kenya. Bjorn has published 2 books, The Real Owners of the Planet and Beauty Will Save the World, which of the latter, Beauty Will Save the World, has now become the most beautiful photography book I've ever seen. It is so elegantly put together and is in itself an ode to aesthetics and beauty. I really encourage everyone, even if you can't purchase it yourself, find the photos within and try and find some of the descriptions attached on the internet, because the book is set up as a series of quotes that have been purposed for beauty or aesthetics that are followed then by an absolutely beautiful, drop-dead gorgeous photo. And the book actually sort of tells a story of how beauty could save the world. Now, just to double down on how much I love Bjorn Persson's work, this is something that is completely subjective and obviously limited to how many photos that I have seen myself. But according to me, on the list of the 100 greatest wildlife photos of all time, Bjorn surely occupies several rungs of that list. There is an emotion that Bjorn delivers with his photos, and as you will see through the chat, that is also by design. If you were just tuning into the podcast, do check it out on YouTube if you can, just because Bjorn and I sat down together in my kitchen here in Stockholm, and at certain times we reference certain photos, and I hold up the book and the corresponding photo to the video so you could sort of follow along. But to be honest, that only happens once or twice. So if you're listening to it on podcast, then please do sit through that recording and just view his photos at a later time. In this chat, Bjorn and I run through the gamut of his career and also then get into the minutiae of photography and sort of the economics of fine art photography. Bjorn's lived in South Africa, traveled through the Himalayas, traveled to Antarctica, traveled very extensively through Africa. Such is the case with these wildlife photographers. They are so well traveled and do such a good job at getting access into the remotest parts of the world. He took a photo of a silverback gorilla from about 10 meters, and the silverback gorilla walked past him and then gave him a little nudge to let him know that he wasn't the boss there. The stories that come out of Bjorn and then also his wildlife photography comrades is so amazing. I really romanticize the work that these people are doing. So in this chat, which absolutely loved, I think doing it in person really does add a rather intangible factor to the chat. You can expect to hear about Bjorn meeting David Attenborough and Jane Goodall. You can expect to hear about his work as an anti-poacher in Africa. You can expect to hear about his experience photographing a snow leopard, which if any of you have seen Walter Mitty, he essentially recreates that scene at the end in the Himalayas. Bjorn talks about how to take photos of big game, the economics of photography, how it all comes together, and then more and more. Please check the timestamps to see exactly what you wanted to see. And all right, mates, hang around to the end to hear my afterthoughts from the chat and as well for me to regale my ambition for the podcast. And so with absolutely no further ado, here is the man himself, Mr. Bjorn. Mr. Bjorn Persson, thank you so much, mate.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure of mine. I'm thrilled to have you. Obviously, we have your books, a print, which is on special because of for the Smart Savannahs project,
That's
right?
That's true, yeah.
Which we're definitely going to get into. But to start, I wanted to ask you, 16 years ago, you weren't a professional photographer.
That's true.
And you had an incident which drew you to South Africa. Maybe not an incident, but a life crisis maybe. Do you want to explain what drew you there and then how photography became a part of your life?
Well, back then I was a youngster, pretty not interested in so many things, a bit arrogant like everybody is that age, and I was living down in South Africa actually, and we went out on a safari in Kruger Park and went into the park, and I kind of looked out the window a bit, not so fascinated. But as we drove through the park and I started seeing these wild, there's a big difference in seeing these animals in the wild than in a zoo or on a photo. I kind of woke up and, felt like, wow, this is pretty incredible. And then I remember we continued, and then suddenly, I saw my first elephant. And it was standing just next to the road looking down at me. Wow. And I can never forget those amber, wise, clever eyes looking down at me. And, I felt like nothing, like a mosquito. Mm-hmm. And that sense of feeling like nothing, below this beautiful animal made me think, put things in perspective, not just when it comes to photography, but our place in this world as humans. They've been around for 20 million years, and here we are, newcomers on the planet. So it really put things in perspective and made me think, and that was something I wanted to investigate. So that you could say that moment changed me forever. And
you said you were an arrogant youngster. Did you have environmentalist bones in you? Did you respect wildlife and think about them?
I had always been interested, but nothing deeper than that before I went down to South Africa. That was an interest that grew. Photography has always, and art has always been a big interest of me. But coming down, see the animals in the wild, experiencing that changed me forever. And I think it does to a lot of people. I see it all the time, Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Just, personally, I've been up close with Asian elephants, and they're extremely beautiful. But the animal that captured me the most was the gibbon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this small little monkey who has very human-like features.
Oh, yeah, the eyes.
Yeah, and they have personalities.
Oh,
they have very distinctive personalities, which isn't to say rhinos and elephants don't as well, but maybe because it's a human-like animal, I really became friends with this gibbon.
Yeah,
and I was, felt... And I think that for me was a moment that I thought about animals differently, rather than just they're here as food, essentially.
Absolutely.
Which is how most people, raised to think about the wildlife, whether it's fish in the oceans or, dogs are pets or cows are food kind of deal. But there is a bigger spectrum to it. But talk to me about, you said you were already in South Africa. I was under the impression that you had this moment which drew you there, and then the photography started. So maybe could you explain why you're in South Africa in the first place?
Oh, I went down with a friend who started working. He got a job in Cape Town as a salesman, and I had nothing else better to do, so I came along, and we lived in a flat in Cape Town. I worked in a pizza store.
Oh man, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, that was the start of my African adventures, and then we started to travel around the continent, and then you come back to this incident that happened in Kruger Park, and after coming back from South Africa, I had this itch. There was something I wanted to, investigate this more.
Yeah.
Because that feeling I got from seeing that elephant, that was really something I wanted to dig deeper into. What made me so fascinated? And I had my cheap camera with me. I looked at my photos, and there were nothing, but they still thrilled me, because you're seeing this elephant. So I said to myself, you got to learn a lot more about these animals. You got to take better photos. You got to, I wanted to share their beauty.
So when you were traveling around the continent and first there, you didn't have a camera around your neck all the time? You weren't taking artsy photos?
I was just a random tourist,
Okay.
Yeah.
So then explain the bridge between the throwaway camera and then now world-class wildlife photos.
So what happened is that I told you I came back to Sweden, and I felt I want to discover this feeling more. So what I realized quickly, I didn't want to go the traditional way. I wanted to document these animals, but I didn't want to go the traditional way of going to photography school or, So I decided that I wanted to learn about the animals before getting into photography. Their behavior, everything. I think it's very important in photography that you have a lot of knowledge about what you're photographing and passion. Those two things are the most important in photography, I think. So I went down and I did my wildlife conservation training. I worked at an animal hospital I even got my anti-poaching training, which was very interesting because
Okay.
there you patrol by foot in the park and you encounter animals by foot and you learn so much about their behavior. And behavior is key because if you can kind of figure out what animals are about to do, then you can put yourself in a good position for a photograph instead of just waiting in a jeep. So it's so important to me. And during this time in the animal hospital, I saw a lot of bad stuff. A lot of the times caused by us humans. It was poaching accidents or vultures getting poisoned from what the farmers put in the harvests, etc. So I decided I can do more than just volunteer on this animal hospital. There's so much more I can do. And then I started to put the puzzle together. I have my photography and art skills and interest, and by spreading the beauty of these animals, by photographing and showing the rest of the world, maybe that way I can affect more people to think about what we're doing to these animals. And I want to also say that at an early stage, I also decided that I didn't want to show the bad things.
Okay.
A lot of conservation is about showing the horrors of poaching.
Yeah, the dead elephant with no tusks.
Yeah, and I think it actually many times, have the opposite effect on people.
Why is that?
Because there's so much negativity going on in the world right now. There's so many, not just when it comes to animals and environment, we have so many conflicts in the world, and we have COVID. You look at the news and you turn it off because it's just too much to take in.
Sure.
You see something scary or horrible, you actually, instead of getting more engaged, a lot of people react the opposite and they just switch off. So I decided early that I want to portray this incredible beauty that I feel when I see these animals. Not just exactly what I see with my eyes, but I want to create the feeling I get with my photographs for people.
I mean, that's a tall order, right?
To
be, like, such an ambitious target to set.
Yeah.
Open up more.
It's a life mission.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a life mission. I don't see a beginning of it. I don't see an end of it. This is what I'm going to do the rest of my life, the best I can, and just try to inspire as many people as possible.
Yeah. This is a question that might drag away from the line of the conversation I want to go down.
Sure.
But do you think you've taken your best photo yet?
No, not in a way. I think I will never take it. I will always be a bit dissatisfied. They say that photography is like surfing. There's never the perfect wave. You always wait for it could be a little bit better.
Yeah.
And even though I have my best photos, I look at them and I see things that probably nobody else see. But, I felt that, what if I could do that, or what if that was the situation?
That's a tough predicament to have, but also that perfectionism is what draws you to amazing photos. I'm on the other end of the spectrum where, for example, I've got the photo and I'm looking at it in Photoshop and I'm thinking that's okay.
Right.
I know it could be better if I spent and do 2 extra hours on it and learned this effect to do this, but that's okay. And I need to train myself out of that into a more perfectionist where it's actually never okay. And actually, we were talking about Nietzsche before we were recording. That notion of the surfers, there's always a better wave. Or for you, there's always going to be a better photo.
For sure.
It is a very, it might be a cliche to say, but a Nietzschean way of looking at the world, because the purpose of life, to become who you are, isn't an end goal. It's a constantly out over the horizon destination.
Yeah, I would agree.
And so even as you climb the mountain, the horizon still bends out of view.
That's true.
You never do reach what it is, and therefore it emphasizes that the journey is the thing that matters.
That's interesting.
But it's funny you say that. Paul Nicklin, for example, says he's taken his best photo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in the experience he had with the leopard seals. Are you familiar with the story?
Yeah.
It's just unbelievable. But I wonder, maybe more would come. But we'll speak more about that later and other photos you can take in the mechanics of photography. Open up a little bit more on the anti-poaching stuff.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. So you're doing this before you're taking photos.
Exactly.
This is a part of the research.
This was the background to what made me realize that I wanted to use photography, or the camera rather, as my weapon against poaching amongst other wildlife-related issues. Yeah.
But I mean, the experience.
Oh, the experience.
Tracking the elephants.
Yeah.
More than that, what did you learn about the cultures involved, and the necessity of anti-poaching and so forth?
Yeah. It's an interesting discussion. It actually goes a bit hand in hand with what I'm doing now with my new NGO that I'm president of. I'm going to come to that. But patrolling and being a anti-poaching in an anti-poaching unit is very difficult. The Africa is massive, the parks are massive. There's bad satellite connection. You're on foot 24 hours a day. You sleep under the stars. So it's a very tough job and limited tools or resources. So that's what we're going to talk about later, and what we're doing to help these guys do a better job and make their job safer. So, and it's very risky. When I worked with anti-poaching, it wasn't so dangerous because the organized crime, wildlife crime, hadn't started. That started kind of 2013 when there was a sudden demand for ivory, and the crash of Zimbabwe economy. So mostly we were focusing on bushmeat, which is local people trying to get food to survive for the day. So anti-poaching is not as black and white as people think. You have people starving to death in these areas, and I would probably do the same thing if my kids were starving to death. I would go into the bush and try to get some meat.
Sure.
But you need to. We were working close with the communities around, and a lot of times when a poacher is caught, his punishment is to become an anti-poaching unit guy.
Okay.
That's the punishment, because he knows how a poacher thinks, right?
But do the incentives work? I mean,
I think so.
Is it risky putting that person in a position of responsibility?
You're in a group, you're in a tradition, in a culture that is very tough. To be able to work from the inside in an anti-poaching unit would be extremely difficult and very dangerous.
Right.
I'm not going to say exactly what's going to happen to you, but
I mean,
it's
well documented, actually.
Yeah.
You've probably seen this firsthand, but I remember watching a documentary about this very conflicted group, because they were essentially white nationalists in South Africa.
Yeah.
But they formed their own private militia as an anti-poaching unit.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with them exactly.
No, not.
They're a bunch of Afrikaans.
Right.
And it was a fascinating documentary because these guys have horrible views, but then they also are doing something very good for the wildlife of Africa.
Yeah.
But maybe in Smart Savannahs, that's the NGO, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because I did see you were affiliated with another one.
I've been supporting quite a few actually throughout the years, and not only when it comes to wildlife, also poverty, fighting poverty, organization that fight poverty and help poor youngsters get education. That's a very important part of conservation as well, right? Because there are so many studies showing that poverty and lack of education leads to wildlife crimes.
Sure.
So it's not just about protecting the animals.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so complicated.
Yes.
The web of economic incentives that drive the poaching. Maybe the audience isn't familiar, but most of the ivory isn't used for art or for collecting. It's used to be crushed and snorted by Asian businessmen. Which it just blows your mind, right? That much horror for such a superficial use. There is a part of me sympathizes with ivory as art, but because I know economically that it would never scale to the point where it does, but as crushed ivory to snort, and it's supposed to be an aphrodisiac, right? I mean,
cure hangovers and headaches and whatever.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
It is. So that's another big part of. So you have fighting protecting the animals being number one, educating or help local communities to not end up in this mess, and then you have the third part that we're talking about now. That is spreading awareness, to the countries that use these products. If we can, and I would say that's probably, if not the most important thing, because if we can stop the demand, that would be the most efficient way to stop poaching, right?
Yeah.
But going back to the economics of the world, we have threatening China with political demands. It's not an easy thing because we're dependent on China, so we don't have the power in the West to make any effects on that, I think.
No, and we're largely too weak to make the threats as well.
Exactly.
Because there's a lot of signaling but very little action.
Yeah.
Australia, during the COVID pandemic, really has taken a massive loss in the international geopolitical spectrum, because we both we asked for an inquiry into the origins of the coronavirus, and we asked for an inquiry into the treatment of the Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang province, and we've asked for a bunch of things, and then followed up with just the signaling measure with an actual committee asking other countries to come on board, and we've taken a big loss because of that, because we actually tried to follow up on some of these policies. And then all the countries that said they were interested actually just had the face of interest, but then underhanded were still making zero concessions on their trade flows, which is ultimately the big, the big weapon that you can use.
Right.
Yeah.
I see.
And so.
Yeah, it's complicated.
It's very complicated,
and it goes up on a very high level.
Yeah.
And then you have another fact that basically China, is a dictatorship. They don't even have the same internet as we do. How can you affect people?
Precisely.
Through Facebook or social media.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult task. I had a friend who is a very well-known game warden in Kenya. He went to do lectures in Hong Kong for school children. And they believe, and this is what they've been taught, that rhino horns, for example, is something that falls off with age, like a reindeer horn.
Okay.
All they do is go around. This is what they're being taught in school. They walk around, pick them up from the ground. No animals. So it's a big task to overcome this cultural loss of knowledge.
Yeah,
it's very difficult.
I think you said something before that was so true, and something I really think as well, that it's demand, which is the thing you really need to stop.
Yeah,
because you can throw all your resources at stopping the supply.
Yeah.
But ultimately it's the demand that needs to stop.
Yeah.
It's the same story with cocaine in the United States and the Mexican border.
Yeah.
I asked James Robinson, who's the author of Why Nations Fail, this exact question, whether the force of demand is potentially stronger than supply.
Right.
No matter what intervention you make on the supply side,
Yeah.
Anti-poaching, NGOs, awareness.
Yeah.
If there are people out there who still will pay for it,
Yeah.
that's a stronger incentive.
Exactly.
And so you're so
And
right.
at the end of the day, unstoppable, because if there is a black market, and also probations is difficult, because if you prohibited something, the price will increase, right?
Sure.
On the black market. So it's a paradox.
There's a great anecdote, you'll love this, to do with shark fin soup.
Oh yeah.
So you know how that was a massive, very popular dish in, I think only China, but let's just say Asia. And it caused the same problem with the rhino tusks or horns. It just caused chop off the shark fin, throw the shark back in the water. It can't swim, it falls to the bottom of the ocean and dies. And it was just terrible. Millions and millions of sharks slaughtered just for their fin. And I read this in Will Storr's The Status Game. He said that shark fin soup is actually no longer a popular dish because it had this status signal of being a very high class thing to eat. But when access to the shark fin soup became available to everyone, because the economics of it just basically made it accessible.
Right.
The high class, the high status people, they no longer had an interest in it because, they can have it. Before I was having it because it was the special thing to have. Exactly, it's middle class. Then the middle class saw the upper class stop having it, and then so they moved on. And now actually, shark fin soup it's still on menus, obviously,
Right.
but it's way less pervasive than it was before.
Yeah.
And I thought that was such an interesting insight. Could a similar thing happen with the snorted ivory? Could it be the case that it becomes every man's drug, and then all of a sudden it becomes no one's drug? It's like maybe a hopeful way of thinking about where it could go. But
yeah. I guess the problem would be the lack of rhinos. There was some guy in South Africa actually started to grow rhinos as cattle, and then he cut the rhino horns off by himself and offered them to China at a much lower price. Don't know what happened to that, but apparently Chinese, if there's blood on the rhino horn, if it actually comes from a wild rhino, this is when they buy a rhino horn in China or Vietnam, they're very specific about knowing the background of this rhino. It needs to be a wild rhino. It needs to be caught in the wild. So it actually didn't work because it's not just about the powder itself or the consistency. It's about the whole. It's it goes back thousands of years.
Really,
they
okay.
believe that these wild rhinos or animals that have some magic powers.
Okay.
So it's all about those kind of beliefs.
Yeah. So it's an ancient
It
thing.
is.
Really, yeah. Well, that's obviously way harder to
very difficult
to get out of a culture.
Exactly.
Yeah, now you say that, it's the same thing with tigers, right?
Yeah.
And
tiger bones. Yeah, you're
precisely.
right.
Oh, shit.
So one campaign, besides photography, I also do a bit of awareness campaigns. One thing we did, the funny thing is that rhino horn consists of the exact same material as human nails. It's keratin. So what we did was a big awareness campaign where we asked people to donate, but we didn't ask for money. We asked for their fingernails.
Yeah.
So we had a stand here in Stockholm. We asked people to come down, cut their nails, and donate them. There was so much people. It was such a great event. Finally we had a big jar of human fingernails that we powdered into a medicine and offered it on eBay and other platforms to China for people to buy at a much cheaper price than rhino horn.
Yeah.
Of course, the goal was not to sell a new medicine or make money. The goal was to create awareness. And TT covered it, Reuters covered it. So
amazing.
Ended up on Brazilian and Portuguese news. And I don't know if there was a big article in Vietnam's biggest newspaper about this campaign. So we definitely succeeded with the goal, which was to create PR.
Nice. I love that story. It's a very tangible way of proving how worthless it really is.
Makes you disgusted almost.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It changes your association with it.
Exactly.
Going from the research, understanding the problem, the animals, and then to the photography side of things, how long did it take to the point where you were really confident in going out for a day and knowing you would bring home something good?
Yeah. Good question. I was in advertising for a while to support my work. So about 6 years, I think, 6 years, I decided to leave a well-paid job in the advertising industry to do this full time. That's also about the same time when the rhino crisis was at its peak. Yeah, 2014. Exactly. Yeah. So that's when I decided, okay, you're good enough to take good photos to affect people, and you need to do this. It was like an inner call, I can't just be part of this this hamster wheel of economy. I just need to do something that gives my life meaning and hopefully affects other people too. So that's when I took the step to, become a full-time professional fine art photographer.
And so for several years, photography was on the side.
Yeah, exactly. It's very difficult to live on this business.
For sure.
It's difficult to travel to Africa.
Yeah.
So I needed a job to support that. Yeah.
So all your free time was essentially thinking about getting the right equipment, getting to the right location, making sure the time of the year.
Every holiday we went down,
Okay, and it was always Africa?
Always Africa.
Okay.
Well, you know, I've been traveling all over the world taking photographs of other animals as well, but Africa has always been closest to my heart.
What's your insight into how prints sell of different animals? Is there a hierarchy of the most expensive animal down?
There is. Of course there is, you know. Not every animal is as our photo models. There is a difference in beauty of animals. So it definitely easier to sell a print of an elephant than a vulture.
Sure.
Yeah.
Although that being said, you do have a great color I don't know if it's a vulture, but it's a bird.
Yeah.
And its colors are amazing.
It's a leopard-faced vulture, and you know that's been a big challenge for me because not just do I want to show the beauty of the obvious likable creatures like elephants and lions, and really try to portray I think all animals are beauty in specific ways. Even a vulture is fascinating to look at, you know, especially these guys.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of my work as well. And another, going back to conservation, actually that's been a bit tricky as well, because what happened in the shade of the headlines about rhino poaching, elephant poaching, people don't realize that even vultures and giraffes, you know, some antelopes are very endangered at the moment. But they don't get the big headlines. All people talk about is elephants because they're more likable. So this is actually a big problem in conservation.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
In case I forget to ask you later, can you remember to talk about also the list of endangered animals in Africa? We won't do it now, but just in case I forget to ask you. Because that's an interesting point that you make. Yeah. It's more than rhinos and elephants.
People don't realize that. They think the rhino is endangered and all other animals are fine. It's the opposite. You know?
Sure.
Like it's called the silent extinction going on right now of giraffes. Nobody's talking about it, but their numbers have plummeted 25% in 10 years.
Is it bushmeat?
No, specifically for giraffes, it's human encroachment. You know that the parks are getting smaller. They need bigger areas, so their natural habitats are disappearing. Okay. And this is, I would say, let's not forget that that's the number one threat to animals, not poaching. You know, we're getting more people we're getting more and more people on the planet.
Sure.
The natural habitats are shrinking, and that is the number one threat to our wildlife.
Yeah. Talk to me about the geography of Africa. If we're picturing a map, you've got South Africa and then all the way up. Where in the continent do the big game live specifically? Because then you can speak about what the big cities are around, or the big countries, the big populations. Yeah. Because in my mind, and this is, you know, pretty ignorant perspective, but in my mind, Africa is just endlessly huge.
That's true.
And the population centers are largely on the coasts, so therefore there wouldn't be much encroachment. So try and explain that to me.
Well, let's not forget that, you know, back 100 years ago, back in time, there was big game everywhere in Africa, on the West Africa, Central Africa. Every country basically had the big five.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. But due to certain countries taking strong legal actions starting mid-century, last century, they started building national parks to protect the animals. Countries like South Africa, Namibia, Kenya, Tanzania. So they were able to protect their big game. This wasn't the case in many, for example, West African countries or sub-Saharan countries, where the animals just roamed free and became targets for poachers and bushmeat hunters. So that's the number one reason why today. So you see most of the big game are concentrated in Eastern Africa, in Kenya, in Tanzania, and then you have Southern Africa with Botswana, Namibia and South Africa also being places where there is still a lot of animals left. Yeah.
What are some countries in the central and would you say subcontinent? No, sub-Saharan.
Sub-Saharan, yeah.
In the central and sub-Saharan parts of Africa, what countries can we think of that had big game as well?
Well, basically all of them, like if you look at Sierra Leone, Liberia, going down to Cameroon. When you come to Central Africa, these countries are tropical, right? So they have a kind of a rainforest fauna. So they're a bit different, but they still had a big number of elephants that are now gone, for example.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
And in 100 years?
Yeah.
That's such a significant change.
Yes.
Wow. It's...
Not to speak of the deforestation as well that happened in these countries in the last 100 years.
No, I can imagine. And surely it's ongoing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Democratic Republic of Congo sits on the world's second largest rainforest.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most kleptocratic, least governable states in the entire planet.
Exactly.
You can only imagine the type of what would you call it? Yeah. Destruction that would be happening, similar to Brazil and the Amazon.
That's a good example.
Like
Ethiopia, they had plenty of rhinos back in time, but basically they're all gone now, and that's due to poaching.
I'm just imagining a massive big tusker sort of strolling up maybe the coast of Morocco, and you get the sand dunes behind them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Wow. Since you discovered just how critical the state of affairs was for the various species, how things developed until today, sorry, exactly the question, can you provide different animal statistics, country statistics, poaching statistics, just unload your knowledge on this whole, topic onto the audience?
Not sure how you mean. Sorry.
State of affairs for the
numbers of...
Yeah, numbers. But also statistics, like maybe Botswana's better at it than South Africa because of this reason, for example.
Sure. Yeah. Well, looking at, the biggest crisis of poaching started in 2013, one could say, with the financial collapse of Zimbabwe. And then that's when people realized there could be a lot of money made on poaching. And so you had an explosion of poaching back in those years, where South Africa, for example, they suffered the loss of about 1,000 dead rhinos a year. Likewise, the numbers were very high in Kenya and Tanzania, but Zimbabwe and South Africa, Botswana, these countries were catastrophes. So what happened in the last few years, due to more awareness and NGOs doing their job to raise financials and better anti-poaching, the numbers have slowly to get better. I think it was last year there was no rhinos killed in Kenya, for example, so they have done extremely well of protecting rhinos.
That's a win.
Yeah. South Africa is down to, I think, about 400 rhinos killed per year, which is half of the number that we saw about 10 years ago.
And what's the estimated population, say, in South Africa of rhinos? Just so we can have a percentage of how many are there.
You have 90%, I would say, about all rhinos in Africa living in South Africa. So naturally and logically, you will have a bigger number of poaching in South Africa. You have about 20,000 rhinos living in South Africa. They have the biggest numbers. When it comes to elephants, they, a few years ago, they were killed at about a rate of 1 per 15 minutes in Africa. The poaching has slowed down, again, for the same reason, increased awareness and better poaching activity. So the numbers are actually gradually improving, although we still have the problem that I was going back to with other species. In the shadow of elephants and rhinos, we see now that giraffes are going down very quickly. Lions, basically since 1970, we have lost about 50% of all lions in Africa. So they're very, people not aware of that. And that's again going back to human encroachment, the loss of natural habitat loss. So there's a different story for each species regarding numbers and who's doing best. But overall, since 1960, I think, and this is a report that came out 2 years ago from WWF, we have lost about 70% of all wildlife in the world.
Wow.
So even though the numbers have gradually improved in certain African countries the last 2-3 years, we're still in a massive crisis.
Although there is optimism to be taken out of that trend shift.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I think
sure.
so.
Yeah.
I think so. If we can turn around the numbers, we can definitely improve those numbers even more.
Yeah.
And one could never give up.
Can you define the distinction between fine art wildlife photography and then regular wildlife photography?
Well, you have, I wouldn't say regular, I would say documentary style photography. Okay. And this is basically photography where you portray the wildlife or the landscape exactly as it was, right? In fine art photography, to me, you're allowed to have more freedom of after work and editing with the images. You want to create a feeling of when you look at these images rather than exactly what happened in that image. So, and fine art photography is meant to be art, right? It's meant to hang in somebody's wall to admire. Whereas documentary wildlife photography is meant to explain and visualize the behavior of animals and that sort of thing. So they have different purposes. Although sometimes there's a fine line. It's quite difficult to say what separates them both.
I imagine there has to be a fine line, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because most of your shots, if you just tone down the editing, could easily be displayed as documentary photography.
That's true.
What about from an insider's perspective? Is there a sort of social hierarchy between the fine art photographers and the documentary wildlife photographers when you're both hanging out, at the end of a day on the savannah?
I think it's two different worlds, to be honest. Of course, there are photographers doing both. So you can't really say that there's this and this group, but I think, when it comes to documentary style wildlife photographers, they're very keen on they're very tough on the rules on how to edit a photograph, for example. So they don't allow much. There's certain effects in the photos, but when it comes to fine art, basically you have the complete freedom of how you wanna edit a photo, and I would say that's the main difference. At the end of the day, we're doing the same thing. We're out in the bush with the camera, taking photos of these animals. It's just about the purpose of the photograph. Is it to make it into art and affect people that way, or is it for it to end up in a documentary on TV to show the behavior of the animals? It's two different things.
Well, you rub shoulders with probably the king of documentary wildlife video and photography, right? It was Sir David Attenborough. Right. And I also saw a photo you had with Jane Goodall too. Yeah. So talk to me about those experiences.
I grew up with listening to David Attenborough and his beautiful voice, and he's always been inspiring. Even when I was a kid, I was actually dreaming about becoming him, one day. That was like a childhood dream to be the next Attenborough and be in a remote forest in Congo somewhere and talk about this little creature. So meeting him was a childhood dream, absolutely. I think he's a complete legend. And I was able during a festival, gala, held by Perfect World Foundation that I supported at the time, to meet him in person and give him my book. So that was a special moment.
What did he say?
Well, he was pretty busy, had a quick look, and really liked the photos. He did, especially one of a polar bear, I remember. But hopefully he had a bit more time when he came back home and looked at the book. So
nice.
And then we've been I sent him a letter afterwards, because he doesn't have email, right?
Really?
No, he just write by hand.
What a legend.
Yeah, I got a letter from him
fuck
afterwards.
You, I'm staying
exactly.
in the 60s. This is where I want to be.
I might be my new way as well.
Yeah.
That would be a true rebel.
Yeah. But you were writing him a letter?
Yeah. I got a reply as well with quite difficult to read his.
Really?
I needed some help from some people to
Mm-hmm.
to interpret the handwriting, but I think we managed to sort out what he wrote to me.
That's so hilarious that he still writes
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
on paper.
Yeah.
That's probably a hot tip to any young conservationist who wants to get in touch with him.
Right.
That's a way to stand out.
It is.
And you know he's going to read it.
It is, and apparently he replies. So
Yeah.
that's also he's a gentleman, and that shows
Sure.
in so many ways.
Yeah. He's probably done more than anybody for touching that
I think
environmentalist
so.
nerve
Yeah.
within the human. you know?
Exactly.
And you can't watch, what's the most recent one? I think it's just called Planet, right?
Yeah, he's done a couple of new ones in the last years. Planet Life or something, I think, where he was actually talking about, usually he got a bit of criticism for portraying the animal world like there was no problem,
Sure.
glamorizing it. But in this last documentary, he was talking about the issues.
Yeah. I think he
Which
did it
was
with
quite
one
different.
of the English royalties and Prince William or something. And
Yeah,
he basically was saying time's up sort of stuff.
yeah.
But
Basically, his lesson of what he's seen and what he learned throughout
Yeah.
his lifetime. It was like the final chapter of his learnings. So
Yeah.
yeah.
it would be a sour note if he ends with just, and you've all fucked it up.
Yeah.
So thanks for what it was beforehand.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't not watch. It's me saying this so hyperbolic and not being able to remember what it was called is a little bit hypocritical. But you can't not watch his documentaries.
No.
And just be jaw on the floor. This is the most amazing stuff I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like-
I mean, Planet Earth I see over and over again just for
Easy.
inspiration.
So much rewatching value.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like there's that scene with the lizard in one of the most recent ones that is running away from a group of snakes.
Okay. Oh yeah.
And then
I know which one.
hundreds of snakes end up coming.
In Galapagos, right?
I don't remember where it
Yeah,
was, but
yeah.
it very well could have
I
been.
know exactly what you mean.
But it was so artistic. There was like a narrative behind this little lizard, and he's grey against the grey of the rock, against the grey of the sand, against the grey of the snake.
Yeah.
Like it was beautiful to watch.
Yeah,
But then it was also this like action scene of him running away from a bunch of snakes,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
ended up making it. There was some drama. A snake got him, but then he ended up getting away.
Yeah.
Like it's such an achievement. Amazing stuff.
Incredible.
And what about Jane Goodall?
That was also a brief meeting here in Stockholm, actually. She had a lecture here in Stockholm, and, always she has been an inspiration to me as well. So after the lecture, I went up to her and gave her my book, and she had a quick look again, and it was just meeting her, like a childhood dream coming true as well, because she's definitely done so much for the apes and the research around that she's also a very admirable person.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Have you taken photos of apes?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Okay.
Gorillas.
Is that the big silverback? Is that what a gorilla is?
Yeah.
Wow. Can
Yeah.
you talk to me about this? What's this like?
Oh, that's actually a success story, just to mention conservation again, because the gorilla numbers have gone up. They were down to about 200 mountain gorillas just a few years ago, and their numbers is up around 800 now. So that's another success story, depending on increased awareness and things that have been done for these species. But seeing them in the wild, to answer your question, is crazy. It's like looking at Stone Age people.
Wow.
It's like sitting in a Stone Age Neanderthal village some 1,000 years ago and just looking at these guys playing with rocks, scratching each other, watching the silverback acting as the leader and father of the whole group, punishing the kids, telling the women, it's a very matriarch or a patriarch society.
Yeah.
Sorry, so it's incredible. Yeah, it's like a time machine to be with these gorillas.
Wow,
it's amazing.
Which one of these books has the gorilla shot?
That would be in mostly. They both are gorillas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we turn to one? And then you tell the story of taking that photo.
Sure.
Because
Let's have a look.
I'm just imagining...
No, wait. Oh, actually, this one.
I'm imagining it being so intimidating.
It is.
To stare down the lens and this guy look at you.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about this image, for example. That has an interesting story. It's a bit of... Should we put...
I'll just put it up for the people. And then...
This quite a special photo. This is a silverback, you know, and they tell you you're not supposed to look into the eyes of a silverback because you're kind of challenging him.
Okay.
But it's kind of hard with a big lens.
Is the lens an eye?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. On this specific photo, I was lying down on the ground, just basically in front of him, like 2-3 meters away.
Holy shit!
And he looked into the camera, and he doesn't look too happy about my presence here, right?
So that's 2-3 meters.
Yeah, 3. Yeah.
Holy hell.
It's really close. It's really close. I'm using a wide-angle lens, and what this picture doesn't tell, the story this photo doesn't tell, is what happened afterwards. Because after clicking a few times, he walked up to me and gave me a big push with his arm.
Oh my god!
And it was just a soft touch, probably from him, but for me it was like a rugby tackle. Yeah. I flew away, and my camera got lost in the grass, and he probably didn't. I didn't feel scared. Mm-hmm. He just did it to show who's the boss, you know. Mm-hmm. And I could feel that, you know. Okay, I'm gonna respect your territory a bit more. But they're very humble and gentle, although they're so powerful. Mm-hmm. And there's no need for them to become more aggressive than that because, you know.
I mean, but they are the apex predator, aren't they? Like they can take down a lot. Not that they ever, because they live in the jungle.
Yeah, and they eat.
But they can take down a bear and stuff, couldn't they?
Well,
this is kind of matching up.
Yeah, they would definitely take down Mike Tyson. You know, I think they did some study on a punch of a gorilla, and it was like 30 times stronger than Mike Tyson's punch.
Yeah, but they're
so.
I mean, what's he weigh? Like a ton, and he can just hang from a tree.
Yeah, a few hundred kilograms, but no, they're extremely powerful. And just looking at, you know, when they walk through the jungle, especially the silverback, you see this. They're called silverbacks for a reason because the back is completely. There's not really any fur on it, just soft fur, and it's metallic looking, like some sort of medieval. What do you call it?
Armor.
Armor, exactly.
Chainmail.
And it's so wide. The back is so wide. You back off just seeing that back. Yeah. It's incredible.
Cool. So you said a wide-angle lens.
Yeah. Because you do get pretty close to gorillas. When you're photographing gorillas, you need to go with not armed, they don't have any weapons, but sticks. But you need to go with rangers that know the gorillas.
Oh, like darts to put them
No, just regular sticks that they can kind of, if something would happen.
To just like go away.
Exactly.
Okay. And that works?
It does, because these gorillas are habituated to humans.
Okay.
They're completely wild, they live in the wild. But at an early stage, they gradually, and this is what Jane Goodall, going back to Jane Goodall, that's basically what she did her whole life as well, adapting the monkeys to her presence, you know, so allowed her to get closer and closer. So they choose certain gorilla families that they let people visit. If you would encounter a group of wild gorillas that have never seen seen humans before, that would be a completely story. Either they would kill you, or they would run away. In Cameroon, I encountered wild gorillas once, the lowland gorillas, and they were so scared. We just saw them for a few seconds, and they ran away because you know they probably felt we were a threat. So that's the main difference. So
gorillas, they are like classic bushmeat, or chimpanzees, like just monkeys in general.
Gorillas are herbivores, right? They just eat.
I mean, from the human perspective.
Oh, from the human perspective,
like they're bushmeat.
Absolutely.
It strikes me that it would be a heroic task to successfully hunt a gorilla. So, what is it poaching that threatens their numbers, or is it again? Land encroachment that threatens their numbers?
When it comes to gorillas, I would say the number one is like human conflicts in the areas of where the gorillas live. That, you know, Congo, for example, has suffered many years of terrorism and different illegal gangs patrolling in these areas with So what they have done is both killing the gorillas just to upset the government and affect the tourism as a terror act. Basically, they kill gorillas to create that sort of attention. And when they live out in the rainforest, right? These criminal gangs or these terrorists, and what they do is they also kill what they can find to survive, because that's the...
Sure, and I guess I totally underestimated. I mean, if you're walking around with an AK-47, you could hunt some gorillas if you needed to.
It's easy for them to shoot a gorilla from distance.
Yeah. Now I want to ask a bit about the mechanics of taking these photos.
Mm-hmm.
That one, you said you were prone, wide angle, 2 meters close to a giant gorilla. David Yarrow has famously taken a lot of his elephant photos via a remote control.
Oh yeah.
So he'll know where the elephants are going to come, set it up, pre-focus it, and then snap away. Talk to me the mechanics about how you've taken some of these shots, because I mean that's a wide angle, that's super close. I mean that's almost under his nose.
Yeah.
So, and then this one, for example,
that's a bit more distance to the background and the landscape. Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about how you're taking the photos, and then what I could learn, but then also other photographers could learn about how to properly take very artistic shots of animals.
Yeah. Well, to start out with, it's pretty mixed, and it needs to be. It depends on which park you're in. Some parks don't allow you to leave the car, so basically you have to take everything that you photograph from a jeep. Some parks you can patrol by foot. I've had help with park rangers helping me take some of the photos, that I can actually be on the ground and photographing elephants, etc. So it really varies from the situation to the situation, and I always try to do the best of that situation, obviously, and respect the rules. That's very important. When it comes to remote controls and such devices, I prefer not to use them myself. It's just a personal thing, because I feel like, to me, it's very important to have connection with the animal that I'm photographing. I think that's a very big, important lesson in photography for me as well, to actually have eye contact with the object. I mean, if I was going to take a photo of you, right, I wouldn't put a hidden camera or camera robot somewhere and sit in the car and take the photos. So for me, it's very important to have the eye contact, because I think something happens chemically. It happens when you meet the person. Something chemically happens, right? With
for sure.
Things we don't even realize, and I'm 100% sure that's the case with animals as well. So that's the way I prefer to shoot them, by foot, getting close, using a wide angle lens if possible. With that said, I 100% respect people using remote controls, etc., because sometimes it's just necessary.
Yeah.
Some of the photos we've seen of snow leopards and other very elusive species would have been impossible to take by foot. So I respect that very much.
But this is a dangerous position to be in, right? Because it's a giant animal, and you're lying down in front of it. How do you play that trade-off in your mind? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can completely explain. The thing is that people ask me, are rhinos dangerous, or elephants dangerous? And I always ask them, are people dangerous? Are humans dangerous? It really depends on the individual rhino or the individual elephant. And before approaching such a big animal, I always carefully try to read it, if it's relaxed, if it's stressed, And that goes back to my wildlife conservation training, which was very helpful for me to read animals and how they behave, and if it's a good position and timing to approach, So a lot of photos I have not, in most of the cases I actually back off thinking this is not a good idea to take this photo, so I better leave the animal alone. Those are most of the cases. But if the circumstances are perfect, if the animal is relaxed, well fed, not irritated, then I gradually approach and can take these photos.
And you have locals there with you, professionals who sort of might know all the animals on a first name basis.
In most cases,
as well,
that's
right?
very helpful.
Yeah.
Not only to just watch out what's in front of me, but also what's behind me.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you never know if there's a snake
Sure.
or a lion in the bush behind you.
Sure.
So it's always good to get a bit of help of surveying the area when you're out by foot.
So this one, for example, you could sense, or you were told that he's not aggressive. And
This specific photo I took from a jeep.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So he's elevated.
He's elevated.
Yeah.
He's coming up from there was a swamp. That's why he has this beautiful shiny mud on him. And it was an early morning and very mysterious light, which I prefer.
Yeah, the clouds are beautiful.
Yeah. So he came up the hill and I was in a bit of lower position from the jeep. Even when, having a low position, I think many photographers agree with me that is very key when photographing animals. Because you do get a sense of connection with them much easier than if you're photographing down at an animal looking up at the car, for example.
Yeah.
So even in a jeep, I try to get it as low as I can. It's always the number one rule.
I mean, how thrilled were you when you get back and you find that it's focused and it's perfectly framed?
Yeah.
Because that's like I said to you before, just out of pure chance, that happens to be my favorite photo when I was going through your website.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it just stood out to me most, for whatever reason.
Yeah. You don't take many of those, if I come back from a 3-week expedition to Africa and I come back and I have 3 really good photos.
Oh, it's not.
No, they're different. They're
okay.
They have different.
But that one you're on the ground.
That one I'm on the ground. Yeah, right in front of him.
So take my same question then.
Yeah.
You knew that he was not aggressive on this situation.
Yes, this rhino. They're both white rhinos. This one is this is the southern white rhino, and this is the northern white rhino. It's kind of hard to tell the difference. They're pretty similar. But of the northern white rhinos, there is only 2 left in the entire world, right?
Oh, crap.
Yeah, 2 females. I don't know if you heard about Sudan.
No, I
the
didn't.
last male.
No.
He passed away 2 years ago. But what they managed to do is keep the frozen sperm of him.
Okay.
So they're trying to do the IVF technology to use these females' eggs and make it's very tragic,
That would be a remarkable, saving of a species.
It is.
That you get to artificially inseminate the last female.
Yeah.
And this is one of them.
That's one of the females. So she's basically guarded 24 hours a day by wardens on foot. And, they help me approach her.
So she's so used to humans.
She's a bit more used to humans than, in case, this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, going back to, it's so specific for each photos, how it happened and how that individual animal was and who it is. You can't really say that in general how I take my photos. It really depends on that specific animal. You understand?
So if we're thinking about the mechanics a bit, you're heavily researched. So you sort of, Paul Nicklin says he makes photos, doesn't take photos. Are you thinking about, before you go, exactly the animal, the angle, the composition? You want a tree to be here, for example. In your head, do you know exactly what you want to do, and then you go and find that, or are you more reactive to, oh shit, this looks good, let's snap it?
I would say both, actually. Sometimes the best photos are just lucky ones. You're on a safari and suddenly you see something amazing just by pure luck. But I would say that perhaps what I've been fortunate enough to have is probably the eye of, without bragging or trying to sound humble, but having basically the eye to see what is beautiful. When people in general might not be able to see that composition. Yeah. And I think that's also another very extremely important part of being a good photographer, is to have the eye. You can have the best cameras in the world, you can have studied for 10 years. Doesn't matter if you can't see what makes a good photo in the surrounding area, then you have no chance of taking a good photo. So I'm very, very extremely observant when I'm out in the bush. I look everywhere, look for a photo, look for a composition, and sometimes I'll just see it by pure luck. In other cases, it's the opposite. I do have a very strong idea in my mind, and I work for that photo. On my most recent trip to Kenya, I always dreamt of taking a big giraffe herd approaching me when I'm down on the ground. They'll to get the perspective. And giraffes are very shy. I had to work a whole day for them to get used to me. And suddenly the sun was going down, because every time I got in front of them, they just turn around and show their butts.
And you're in a car or you're walking?
I was walking.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I managed to get the shot. It's a brand new one, so I don't have it in the books here, but
okay, cool.
I'll send it to you later.
Yeah, I'm keen to see it.
Yeah.
You do have some giraffe shots in there.
Yeah.
One of them, very beautiful because it's very far away. And then you just see their necks in the silhouette.
Oh, yeah.
That was very nice.
Yeah, thank you.
So...
Yeah, not always do you want to get close to an animal. Sometimes actually making the landscape the hero and the animals just, part of it could be an equally beautiful photo. So there's no set rules of...
But you have done the research, you've gone to the place, you've made it so that you're there at the right time. What are you wearing around your neck? How do you feel about different cameras, different lenses? Like, what are you using? And then also the editing process. How do you think about that?
I use Canon. I have 2 camera houses because there's been a couple of times where I just brought one camera, and I had to fix something that broke with a torch in my mouth and toothpicks, So it's wise to bring a couple of camera houses. I use Canon. I have a Mark IV and I have a SDR 5D. So Mark IV is a bit quicker. The 5D is actually more of a studio camera, but a lot of the photos I take is not action photos. They're more like scenic or idyllic photos. So it's a perfect match for me and my style. And then I do have big lenses as well, up to 400 something that I bring with me, because certain times it's just impossible to approach because of the terrain or whatever. So, but I always prefer to use the wide angle lenses.
Yeah.
Maybe up to 200 can work as well. Again, you get more detail with these wide angle lenses, and the sense of connection with the animal. So those are my favorite lenses. When it comes to editing and afterwork, that's something I see when the image pops up in my... Well, so a lot of times I can actually see it even in my camera, what needs to be done with this image. Sometimes I do nothing. The photo is just perfect as it is. Sometimes it could demand days of work to make it right, and I really treat it... I always say that kind of the raw file, you know what a raw file is?
Yeah.
It's like
Maybe you explain.
Basically, that's the untouched, like the information, the exact information of the photo. And I always see, as a fine art photographer, to me, the raw file is my canvas. So basically, a lot of times one could say that I paint these images to come alive the way I wanted them to feel. It could be so much work, and we're talking about details in shading and colors and compositions and filters that I use to create, again, what we started talking about in the beginning of the conversation, that I want people to feel the way I felt when I saw these animals, not exactly what I saw, but rather the feeling I got when taking these images.
As someone who's now playing around with Photoshop, I'm very intimidated by the range of possibilities and amateur hand. How long did it take you to become comfortable with these softwares to the point where I can import a raw file and and I'll be like, hey Bjorn, make it look like this, and you'd be like, yeah, no problem, I know exactly what to do.
Right.
Yeah. Like, how long did it take?
No, I'm not an editor. I do the editing myself, but to me, you never get fully learned, right? It's like saying saying to an artist, how long does it take for you to get comfortable with the pencils or whatever you're using, the oil color, you can never stop learning. And at the end of the day, it's not about the programs, it's about, creating the look and feel of how you want the image to come through.
No.
You need to see when you're done, when the image is 100%. That's more important than knowing the skills of Photoshop or any other program.
Yeah.
You understand the difference?
Sure.
Maybe a bit vague.
I do understand. Like, you'll never...
You could be...
you could always be better.
I could study Photoshop for 10 years, but then still not be able...
the horizon
to
will still
create the
bend
images
out
I
of
do,
the
if I don't have the eye. It's the same with photography.
But with that being said, you have published 2 photo books, so there is a very professional level of image in there.
Yeah.
So to get to that level where you're confident to publish, how long and how many hours in Photoshop did it take for you to get there? What were you doing to learn?
I'm completely self-learned. I never went to school when it comes to computer programs, and I love them because they are very user-friendly, and you learn by experience, right? By trial and error. And I think it's the same with painting. If you compare that, you learn by trial and error, right? So to say in time, I don't know. Using Photoshop is something perhaps I have used for the last 10 years as an artist, and I do get better and that's pretty natural. Everyone who spends a lot of time on a certain tool ultimately gets better.
Nice.
So but at the end of the day, if you can get the image in the camera, that's always the way I prefer it.
You kind of answered this question earlier, saying that the photographer's eye, to like have that aesthetic sense, is something you either have or you don't. Maybe you can build it, but I think that's a really cool insight to have. I wrote a short article about like why I'm interested in photography, and I sort of said that if you have a camera hanging around your neck, you're forced to notice the aesthetic way more.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Whereas you could just go throughout life, like I'm sure you do, I do as well, and notice things you really like, design you really like, colors that you really like, and just notice that they are there and that form sort of exists.
Yeah.
But, so you sort of answered it, that's a big component. But I wanted to ask you, and then as I interview more photographers, I wanted like balance all the answers together to see what they say.
Like a study.
Exactly. A bit of a cross-sectional study.
Yeah.
And you're the first participant. But if you could give a percentage allocation on a pie graph to what it takes to be a great photographer. Equipment, the skill, and then being in the right place at the right time, and the eye.
Yeah.
Percentage allocation.
Percentage-wise. I think having the eye, let's be a bit honest, I would say it's about 90% to me.
Okay.
Yeah. With the equipment of today, I mean, you got to know your camera, obviously. It's got to be in your backbone how to use it. You know everything. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get what you want. So it's just, for me, it's just a tool. But to be able to see the compositions, the photograph before you take it inside your head is to me 90%. 4% would be the camera. The surroundings, that's not something that you control, right? Well, you can seek it up, you can find it, of course, but you can't control it. Nature is what it is. So those last percents comes down to just, it's connected with the eye, right? Because you look for the beautiful compositions, you look for the beautiful landscapes or animals. So it's again going back to the eye. And
let me replace being in the right place at the right time with research.
Oh, research.
So equipment, research, eye.
Okay, research is a good point. Okay, I would say then maybe that research would be hard to say in percentage-wise, but randomly must be about 20% maybe then goes when I think about it, because I do a lot of research. I know where I'm going. I study the seasons. There's so many factors of not just where to go, but when to go and how to get there and how to do it. So research is very important. So maybe let's say 20% is research then, and 75% is
the eye.
And
the
other
5% equipment.
Yeah, the
Perfect.
equipment to me it would be the last one.
I love that answer because it gives myself and other amateur photographers a lot of hope that they can as well create beautiful images. Because
I think so, yeah.
I think if you polled maybe every this is me totally projecting, I've no idea. If you just polled every photographer and you could get this sample, I think equipment would be so high up there.
Yeah.
Just because as you learn your camera, I could bring 100 people in, photograph you right here, and maybe one person has the eye and they somehow catch something.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's like marginal differences. But that's I love that. It's because if the eye is really the determining factor, then yeah, anyone can go out there and take a fucking good photo.
I'm 100% sure about that, because everybody really admires and loves something, right? We all have different interests. For me, it happens to be wildlife and animals. And I think, the eye is connected to the mind, right? The heart. So I think anyone who has a passion for something will take ultimately great photos of that. Whether it's flowers, whether it's people, whether it's still lifes. The first lesson is to listen to your inner, not just look at trends. Okay, right now, this style of photography is in fashion, or not even looking. Even if you become a wildlife photographer, let's say, don't look at what's winning competition. Don't look at what other photographers. Don't look at me. Just try to find what do you like in when it comes to wildlife. Is it photographing amazing insects, or is it photographing huge whales or fish? I don't know. Find your big interest, and then the photography that will shine through in the photography.
To take behind the scenes of taking a photo again. I was listening to an interview with Paul Nicholin. I'm sorry I keep bringing him up, but because I listened to his interview over the weekend, it's top of the mind. Yeah. And he said on a project, because National Geographic photographer, it's like, hey, I'm going to take pictures of penguins in this habitat to tell this story. So he has a very specific goal. Yeah. He said that he'll come back from an assignment with 100,000 photos, which I was very surprised to hear, because that almost implies that it's just crank. Get the more photos you take, the bigger your possibility one of them is going to really, pull your pants down. Well, so I was like, this is amazing. What do you think about that, and how did you operate? If you came back from a very good day on the Savannah, how many photos are you uploading into the computer? Well,
not as many. I don't shoot I try to shoot manually. I don't use the what do you call it in English?
The auto continuous flow.
Exactly, because to me it creates a problem. I do come home with 100,000 images, and it takes 1 year to look through them. It's just a practical reason.
For sure, yeah.
And I feel like I don't have really control of what I'm doing, so I prefer to take one photo at a time. I do take many photos, and I do it completely agree. It's quite logic that the more photos you take, the bigger the chance is that one is going to be perfect when it comes to sharpness. A lot of times, the biggest challenge of nature and wildlife photography is to because everything is moving, the weather is usually tough, the circumstances are rough, right? To get perfect sharpness in a photo is much more difficult than being in a studio with...
you control the entire environment.
Exactly. So you got to shoot. And you got to come back, and you got to never give up. I have this rule for myself that even when I feel 100% happy, I even look in the camera, I feel I got it.
Yeah.
I continue.
Yeah.
I continue till basically my driver or my guide is crying. Then maybe we go back. Yeah. So just keep pushing it is really important.
And what about photographers you look up to when you were both sort of coming up and learning the craft to then now, as like I said, you know, some really on the, I think at least from what I've seen, and obviously I'm not a particularly well-researched source in this area, but you know, I do really have my softest spot is for wildlife photography. So I've at least the top, 20 guys out there, top 20 Instagram accounts. I've seen most of their stuff. And I really do think, I'm not just saying this because you're in front of me for like the sake of brown nosing, but on the top 100 best wildlife photos, you have several spots in that list.
Oh, thank you.
I really think so. Some of them just are so amazing. So from going from the beginning to now, who are the guys you did look up to, still look up to, and so forth?
Like I said before, I try not to look too much at other photographers, and I've never done, because I was very keen on finding my own voice, having a more artistic... Actually, to be honest, I looked at other photographers and tried to find out, to see what they're not doing.
Okay.
I would say I use them as an kind of anti-inspiration. Not saying I incredibly much admire the work of Yarrow, of Nick Brandt, of everybody, amazing photographers, but it was really important for me to study my competition just so I could figure out how can I find my inner voice, my specific own style. Nothing makes me more happy when people say, "Oh, that's a Bjorn Persson photography," because then I know I've succeeded.
You've hit a style.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's the same with music. I think you got to find your style, and otherwise people are going to get confused or think it sounds like something else. So to me, it's always been, and to find that style, I think I looked more into actually traditional painting, the classic Rembrandt. They have the classic stories in the photos. There's always a story. You look at a painting by Rembrandt or whoever, and you wonder what's going to happen next. So the story is very important in my photos. I want people to think what is going on there and what's going to happen next. If I can create that like fiction in people's mind, I think I've succeeded. That's more interesting to me than technically taking the perfect photo of a hummingbird eating an insect. To me, that's not interesting. Not saying I completely respect it and admire that sort of work, but to me, that's not my style. That's not interesting. I rather look for the story in the image. You understand?
I completely understand.
Okay, yeah.
And that's looking for what the other guys are missing.
Right.
I mean, that's a winning strategy for sure.
Well,
but I will say, very Swedish of you to sort of not even lean into the role model question a little bit. What I found, having lived here for a while, is that the notion of role model or people you look up to or people you model yourself on, it just doesn't hit. It doesn't hit the same nerve with Swedish people as it certainly does Australians and certainly does Americans. For example, if you ask me that question on pretty much any topic, I'll have several people that I totally look up to and want to emulate. Which doesn't mean copy, but it definitely means go in that direction. And maybe that's just me, again, just projecting my own way of looking at the world onto you. Right. But do you find that? Is that a Swedish thing?
I think it could go back to our, kind of in our belief that everybody is equal and nobody should be different, which is quite boring at the end of the day. And it sounds also, I hope people not gonna think that I'm arrogant in some sort of way, because that's the opposite of who I am. Not having photography role models doesn't mean I don't admire other people's work. It's the opposite. But I think that if you have looking up too much to role model and admire their work and try to do what they do, you are going to do what they do. You're going to end up having the same images at the end of the day, but bad copies of that role model's work. Yeah. So that's why it's a bit dangerous to follow too much of trends and other photographers.
Yeah, that's probably really wise advice. A guy who I have a particularly soft spot for is called Christopher Hitchens. He's not a photographer, right? He's a old journalist, but one of the best speakers of all time, truly of all time. And I will watch hours of him speaking, trying to, emulate. Like, what can I do with my speech to make it more easy to consume, just aesthetically pleasing. Yeah. And then I find myself doing this shitty kind of British accent, leaning on certain words the way he would, using the same types of turns of phrases he would. Yeah. And then you just become, like you say, you become the second best. Yeah. In my case, not even top 1,000, but like you become a cheap copy of that person. Whereas if you can just copy the original, but that's great. I mean, there was nothing arrogant that came through the message for sure. Right. I mean, I didn't pick up on that at all. It's really just like,
it just goes back to finding your inner voice, finding out what you are interested in, and have the eye for that. I think that's the number one goal. There's no shortcuts to that. You just got to start with the heart, what you love, and then you go all out. I could never become a good fashion designer,
Sure.
Because I don't have that interest.
Right.
It's just simple as that.
You have to love it,
Yeah, you have to love it, exactly.
So the economics of photography really fascinates me. Dave Yarrow tells a story of a shark he photographed. He got paid $13,000 for the photo, for the rights in newspapers, the right to use the image, $13,000 all up. But then he got a call from one guy and sold it for $6,000 3 times. So in that one phone call in the fine art market, he made more money than he did having this image produced all around the world, because it was like a classic photo of a great white eating a seal. Yeah. That's really fascinating to me, because talk to me about the economics of it all. You were financing yourself for so many years with your advertising job. Now you're self-sustaining photographer, right? So you're selling prints, you're selling books. Take me behind the economics of photography and your experiences with it, and perhaps comment on the bigger picture as well, how photographers are living and so on.
Yeah, well, to start out with, it was difficult, and it is difficult to break through, to actually, we talked about before, the amount of images that we see out there through internet today as well. It's so difficult to get people's attention, and actually make somebody pay for a photograph, put it on the wall and admire it. And to me, that's the ultimate goal, as an artist. So I'm very fortunate and blessed having been able to do that, to come through and today work as a fine art photographer and sell my work, because that's what I do. The economics of fine art photography is that you got to work with small editions, because to me these photographs, they're more than nature photos. They're art. I consider them as art, and so does my gallery. So I sell them in small limited editions. So they have a value, so they have an increasing value. So yeah, that's my main income. And then of course, like you mentioned yourself, books, which I do mostly actually to give in depth to my photo, to give backgrounds to my stories and photographs. But when it comes to the value of a photograph, I think that's the key question. How much should one consider paying for a photograph of an elephant? And I always reply that, people sometimes say, how long did it take for you to take that photo? I always reply, a lifetime. Because the photo that I'm showing you is the sum of my whole life and everything I know. It's also the sum of having had malaria for 2 weeks, 2 times in my life. I had tick bites. I had several bites that I had to have surgery from. It's what you don't see in the photograph are the endless amounts of hours sweating in the sun, sleeping in harsh circumstances, being hungry, walking in the Himalayas where I shot photographs of snow leopards, and you're out there in minus 30 degrees and you sleep in a tent. You're freezing your ass off to get these photos. So so much, incredibly much work that goes into those photos that I wish people would understand. So to me, selling them as art, having a good price, to me it's quite obvious that they should, that's the price they should have, because there's so much work going into this. It's not like being in a comfortable studio taking a perfect photograph of a coffee cup.
Exactly.
There's pain and there's hours behind them, and I think every photographer would agree me having this.
It's like the famous Picasso anecdote where have you heard it?
No.
I think it's Picasso, but a couple are walking through the park in New York. What's it called?
Central Park, yeah.
And they come across Picasso and they say, hey, can you sketch us out? And he sketches them out, and then he goes, okay, that'll be $1 million.
Right.
It's like $1 million. It took you 4 minutes, and he said, no, it took me 40 years.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Yes. So you were talking about having limited editions, or how do you?
That's more the technical aspect of it. I mean, obviously, the number one is to have photographs that stands out. That makes the work needs to speak for itself. The work needs to be so good that people are willing to collect and show interest in it.
But
that's
how do you price it? Because this is what I'm thinking. How do you determine the right number? How do you create the right amount of artificial scarcity and then know what to price each one? It's such a
it's a learning process. It's a dialogue with galleries. It's a dialogue with other people, clients and experts to get at the right level. At the end of the day. But at the end of the day, I think you just got to lean back and look at yourself and think, and not be shy of saying, I put so much hell of a lot of work into this image that this is what I think it's worth. At the end of the day, there's nobody else who can tell you what it's worth. It's got to come from you and what you think. And some of these photos, I think today are quite, basically, you could say historical. Like take this rhino, for example. We talked about it earlier. There's 2 of them left in the world. They might die out within 5-10 years, the whole species, and this could be one of the last photos of that rhino. There doesn't matter how good of a photographer you are, in the future, you cannot take a photo of this specific.
Yeah.
So that's also an aspect of the value that I decide on my work.
What's the best-selling print that you have?
I would say it's the Lion King.
Okay.
It's a portrait of a.
Is that where he's not facing the camera?
Should I show it?
Yeah, for sure. There's one line that I'm picturing. He's facing away, and there's a tree and the setting sun.
No, this is a portrait actually, and it's going to be interesting to see what you think. And I would agree, it's probably this photo.
Nice.
The portrait, And I think what makes it special.
It's so crisp.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a wide angle in his face, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty close here, and I think what makes a good photograph good, I don't know, it's just something again that you feel. When I have this photo on my wall back in my house, and every time I look at it, I never get tired of looking at it. I just feel a sense of calmness when I look at him. He's like an old wise man, peaceful with himself. It just makes me calm, and perhaps that's what people felt buying this photo.
And so how many editions did you create for this?
I have editions. I have different sizes. Total edition of about 50 prints that I do.
On each size?
No, not on each size. Spread out on about 5 sizes. Yeah.
And what smallest print, how much to cost, and largest print, how much does it cost?
The smallest print that I have, they're a bit different depending on which print, but
of the Lion King.
Of the Lion King. Yeah. Right now it's 75 centimeters times 50 centimeters, and that's 1,000 euros, 10,000 Swedish kroner, and then up to the biggest one, which is 100,000.
10,000 euros.
10,000 euros.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. So that's the best-selling print. Is it out? Is it still selling?
It's still selling.
Okay.
Yeah.
So take that
it's sold out in a couple of sizes, but
so
it's getting there.
This is the core of the economics of fine art that I'm trying to get at.
Right.
Here you have determined that this print, I can price it at 10,000 euros, and it can it can hang on some, like that's a big, it was like a meter, right? So it's a centerpiece on a wall. And then there's a couple editions of that. Then how did you know that 10,000 euros was the right way to price it? Do you look back on it now and think, damn it, maybe I should have done more editions at less price or less editions at a higher price?
Well, you increase your prices gradually.
But with each additional photo, yeah.
With that too, and you know,
can you within this? Of course you can. It's your decision.
Yeah. So I actually, you know, it's like art. It goes up in value because of a lot of depending factors. Exhibitions that you have, the more experience you get, the more you sell. There's a lot of factors why art increases in value. So you know, the prices I have now will increase next year, and that's a discussion I've had with my gallery.
And the 50-50 split with the gallery?
Yeah.
So
that's not a set rule, but it's kind of the general rule that artists have with galleries, even not just photography, when it comes to all sort of art.
And that is... Oh, damn it. Why did I look at this? I lost my question. No, because...
Something about value prices.
Yeah. It's to get to the, yes. So, and the price of the prints will correlate almost directly with your notoriety, right? And then how the previous ones have been selling.
Yeah.
So,
and what I think is a good image, you know, a lot of times, you know, I come back and if I have a new photo, at the end of the day, I'm the one to decide. Okay, I think this is worth being a top photograph that should go for these amounts. You know, I select out of
I'm interested how necessary the gallery's role is in all of it, because I read on your website, and we haven't spoken about it yet, but I plan to. You also oversee the printing process to make sure that it's on the best paper, it's the cleanest image, everything. So if you're overseeing that process and your sales channel is largely just through, I would say, Instagram and your website, how necessary are galleries still? And of your sales, if you are willing to say, what percentage come from the gallery and what percentage come from your website and your Instagram?
It's hard to say. I mean, galleries still have a very important role because they exhibit. It's one thing to see a photo on your phone on Instagram and seeing hanging 2 meters in size, hanging in a nice gallery somewhere in the world.
Yeah.
It makes all the difference in the world, or seeing it at the next exhibitions. So the galleries are very important to me. They're also very good partners that I can have a dialogue with when it comes to value and prices and editions, etc.
Yeah.
So they're absolutely my partners, and does that answer your question?
And then the percentage of sales from your overall sales, how much from the gallery? I mean, you don't have to say it, but only if you want.
I don't think I could give you the exact answer.
Okay.
It's very hard to say.
Okay. Just because I imagine
the galleries I work with sell very well, and you know, it's partnership. It's like it's a partnership that grows with time because you understand each other better, and etc. So because I'm projecting myself onto the situation. I'm thinking about my own path, and when I eventually have taken a photo that I think is worth someone spending money for, I'm gonna have the podcast audience, which grows every day, to leverage it onto.
And I'm thinking going into the future, how much will photographers need? For example, let's take Paul Nicklin again. 7 million Instagram followers. Does he need a gallery to sell 100,000 euro prints?
I still think he does. Because
yeah, you think so?
You got to see them in real life. You got to see them, these incredible photos that he's taken in real life, in big size. Makes all the difference in the world. And so I think in Instagram, social media is a good way of creating awareness around your name and your work. But nothing beats the real thing. A beautifully framed photo on a gallery wall. It's so important.
Totally. And David Yarrow agrees exactly with what you're saying as well. You know, he has the name notoriety. Right? He's like friends with celebrities and stuff like this. Former US presidents have his photos on his walls. So he has the notoriety, which is so much of the artificial scarcity of the product. Right. You know? But he also says, you know, you can't get rid of the gallery because seeing it there first person is inescapable. Yeah. Though there is a part of me that's thinking that process could, with the right technology, could also be supplemented, you know, with a really artificial projection onto a wall. But anyway, that's kind of future stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah.
More of the economics. If you could ballpark the costs of, say, a trip to Africa, where... Actually, a better way to frame the question is, how many trips to Africa do you think it took to compile the book?
This is 6 years.
6 years.
6 years of travel. And multiple travels each year.
And so...
Thousands of hours in the bush. Yeah, so there's a lot of investment from my side in these photos as well. And again, that's a good point, because that's also something people maybe not always understand, that there's a lot of investment in these photos as well financially.
Right. Could you potentially ballpark, you know?
Well, you know, depends on... I've been fortunate to have some of my trips sponsored in the last years as well, so that's been very helpful, because it's crazy the amount of money that you pay on a lot of these safaris. So that's been helpful. But I mean, let's say if you would go on a safari and you would take photos and try to sell them at home, you would at least have to look at about 2 weeks in Africa would cost you about 5,000 euros, right? Just for the trip. Yeah.
Safari included?
Everything included.
Everything included.
Yeah, the whole package of going to Africa for 2 weeks, spending time in a national park, you would have to pay about 5,000 euros just for the trip. And then on top of that, the camera gear, which is ridiculously expensive. Yeah. Some of the lenses are up to 100,000 kroner. So yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I've got the Sony Alpha 7 III. Bought it secondhand. You know, it's a great camera, but it's not the Ivy League camera. Yeah. But I'm thinking that with the Zeiss lenses, it could take a picture like this. Yeah. If it's done perfectly. Yeah. I'm thinking. Yeah. So. Yeah. And that's already what, 3,000, 4,000 euros investment. But like you say, a lens itself could cost 10,000 euros.
Exactly. Yeah. Lenses are mostly what's mostly expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. How important is access? Because I'm also imagining that you get there. Now you did the hard yards where you took anti-poaching courses and spent so much time living in South Africa. So you built this internal network naturally where you could now be like, okay, I sort of know who to call to get the access, to get the permission to walk around, all this sort of stuff. That must be such a crucial variable, the access.
It is. And some of the places that I go to and where photographers like me go to, like Antarctica, the Arctic, you cannot go there. It's almost impossible to go by yourself. It's possible, but very difficult and expensive, you know. So a lot of places that I go to, I have to go with a group, you know, on a boat and do excursions from that boat. And but in Africa, I do have people, depending on, again, where in Africa I go. And sometimes I have, you know, I have a very good friend in Kenya, for example, that I work closely. We've been working together for many years now. And he's like a brother to me. He kind of reads my mind. And he kind of knows what I'm thinking before I'm doing it. You know, so it's very important to have a guide and a driver like that in these circumstances.
What about some of the dangers? So you hinted earlier that malaria, tick bites from ticks.
Yeah.
What dangers have you been exposed to from taking these photos?
Yeah, actually, I mean, you're always in a constant. If you're doing things, even when you're doing things perfectly, when you're doing things right, you never know because these are wild animals and things can happen. It's not a museum to be in a national park, anything, or a zoo. I mean, something could happen, but it's very important for me to not risk anything. The risk of the life of the animal. That's why I pay a lot of respect to the animals, because if they would charge me or injure me, they would probably be killed. And that's not something I could live with. That would be the worst of all. So I'm very respectful of the animals. The dangers, I've been charged by hippos, for example, but those kind of charges, they happen when you don't have a clue, or when you're surprised. I was walking to my tent one night. I even had a Maasai with a spear guarding me and following me to the tent, and suddenly there's a big hippo on the trail, and I thought the Maasai was gonna, he dropped his spear and started running, and me ran after him like probably broke the record in 100 meters,
oh, man.
So fast, and the hippo came after us. So there's been
How'd you get away from it? Isn't it?
Well, we hid behind some bush, and they see pretty poorly.
Jesus.
The Maasai ultimately started throwing rocks at it, and that really scared him. Small little rocks, and that scared him. Yeah. But the most dangerous things have been insects, different sort of bites. I was bitten by a spider in Madagascar a couple of years ago, and I had emergency surgery here in Stockholm.
Oh shit!
Infection big as a banana, right between my legs. So
no way.
Yeah.
Oh fucking hell! What was the spider?
They suspect spider bite because it happened probably during the night.
Oh, but you can't even.
They can't
identify
tell.
the spider.
No, they can't tell exactly. But the doctor said it looked like the symptoms and the development of the wound looked like a spider bite, a poisonous spider bite. So things can happen, and they do all the time. And
Man,
it's not completely free of risks.
There is so much. I think it would be too much of an embellishment for this podcast, but you've gone to so many different corners of the planet, and I think this is another thing with photographers, especially successful photographers. They're some of the most well-traveled people in the world. Madagascar is a country I romanticize enormously.
Right.
If you gave me right now an open check, I'd go straight to Madagascar.
Right. It's the coolest place in the world. Yeah.
And that's so. It was very cool, but I guess it would be a bit too self-indulgent to just talk about the travels a lot. But from all the different travels, is there something that stands out to you the most? You just say Madagascar is incredibly beautiful. What sort of countries or experiences are just too good that you couldn't not share?
I think the further you go, who said there's a good saying that you got to go the extra mile to get a good photograph, and there's so much truth in that, I think, because you get to places where few people have been or few people go, and there's just a sense of, you can feel that in the landscape, that this is an untouched places like the Himalayas, or the deserts of Ethiopia, or the ice worlds of Antarctica. You go out to these places and you can just feel that, wow, these places are unique. Perhaps I was the first human being in this little specific area. You could be the first, technically. And I think that also comes through in some of the photos. When you do take photos that are in certain environments that are hard to get to, that you feel that remoteness in the photos. It shines through. So
a specific experience. If one stands out.
I think I've got to think for a second. To me, I never forget walking through the jungles of Cameroon. You know, that's not maybe something that people have done quite often. You know, just we were out for about 2-3 weeks in the jungle, hacking through the jungle like a traditional Tintin expedition, you know, sleeping under the stars, and that was very unique feeling, I think, just for the simple reason that not many people have been there. Yeah.
That, I can't help but think about access when you say that specifically. How does one find themselves with the right people at the right time of year to walk through the jungle and sleep under the stars? Because it requires a lot of preparation, I imagine. Is that a case where because you are a recognized photographer, you got access? Or is that you just, hey, I'm paying for this expedition, let's go and do it?
Sometimes it's like that. You know, people have heard of me and want to help my work. Sometimes I have to find local partners, especially in countries where with not so much access. If you take Cameroon, so it's really important to do good research and find very professional people that can help you. Absolutely, it is. Cameroon is not a place where you, like you say, you buy a flight ticket and go by yourself and check out the forest. You know, you gotta have the right people with you that knows the terrain and how to survive there. So it's very important.
I really think there must be out there. If it's not created yet, I'd love to do it, but it requires so much money and access. A book that explores China's influence in Africa, and you go to all the different countries, mostly in the sub-Saharan, and look at these either mines or work sites that are all Chinese men, and to photograph them in the African environment, it would. That's in my
pretty
mind,
surreal.
But it would. But if so, you can, we can speak about it here. But to execute on that requires crazy access and crazy money. You know, is there any way around it? Is there any way around
that specific image of Chinese workers?
Take that as an example. But it could also be many other things that people imagine.
Yeah, well, since I haven't done it, it's hard for me to say. But you know,
but you have experience in Africa, for example.
Yeah. I mean, I would, of course. Personally, I would ask the people that I know in Nairobi, for example, what would be the next step. I would ask them how can we do this? Who do we need to contact? You know, it's all about contacts, right? Probably in a network of a few people, there will be somebody knowing someone at these factories, and then you get maybe perhaps an open door in there. With that specific image, I think it would be very difficult with China being so forbidden when it comes to everything. If I would take that photo, that's a good question. Probably have to go the old traditional spy, do the spy thing,
exactly.
Sneak in the bush, and because they're out in nature, right? They're not.
Well, it's just like super low cost manufacturing.
Yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't allow a photographer to document them, what they do. But you probably have to either pay somebody or do it secretly.
But I'm just imagining that amazing contrast of, giant African man, small Chinese man, smoking with a smolder in the background or something.
Yeah. And, image-wise, it's I think, in a lot of ways what's going on with China, it's basically a new form of colonization that we're seeing of Africa, with 100%. China taking over the continent. They're not invading invading the countries. They're buying them like monopoly.
Yeah,
they are like this with the presidents and the leaders of these countries behave very weakly towards China, allowing them to do whatever they want, and they get quickly rich. So they're in the hands of China. And this is another big thing related to conservation, right? Because when you're building roads, that's back to the human encroachment. And that's something China is the reason for many problems in Africa now when it comes to wildlife. They're building roads, they're building factories, they're building harbors, pushing out the natural habitats. So it's a big problem. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And we definitely need to talk about smart savannas.
Yeah.
But I just realized that maybe I haven't done a good job at keeping a central line of inquiry.
No. I think it feels like everything we talk about kind of goes together. Like you come back to something, and then it's all
Hopefully.
connected.
If I think if a podcast works, then it does achieve that.
Right.
But it's up to the audience to say.
Yeah,
I think we're a bit biased.
Right.
One more thing on the fine art sales. Could you take me behind the printing process? How much does it cost to print? And is this just a marginal detail to think about from a photographer's perspective? Also publishing books, could you self-publish this feasibly, or does it have to, are there special photographing publishers out there?
It's all about quality. I don't want to go into specific numbers when it comes to printing. Obviously, you have very high standard level of printing and cheaper ones.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can say is that to get a good quality paper and the best equipment and good people to print your images is absolutely very costly.
Sure.
Yeah, and the same thing with books. I always decided, went for the best quality and everything because I want these books to be timeless, to have good quality.
Yeah.
To me, it's important. Some photography books are just cheap, thin paper, and to me, the design of the whole book, the quality, the weight of the book is part of the art, right? The experience of looking at my photos. So I'm always kind of strict with that, with always going for the best quality when it comes to production.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking is because I'm thinking about this photo book that we were speaking about off air before.
Oh yeah.
I want to go the self-publishing route.
Okay.
Just because you own, way more of the revenues.
Yeah.
And it's because the distribution is leveraged from my audience and his audience.
Yeah.
The publisher's not going to add any value to sales.
Yeah, you don't make much money on
So
books.
I'm thinking, I agree, has to be the highest of quality. And I think photo books, you can also price them 50, 100 euros because people know that they're buying a piece of art. They're not buying something to read.
Exactly.
Is there any precedence that you know of people going the self-published route with a photo book? And if so, how much would this cost to produce?
This book, this is my first book. That's the second one. The first book I published through Kickstarter.
Okay.
Which is, what's it called?
Yeah.
It's a term.
Crowdfunding.
Crowdfunding.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I had little hopes when starting it, but through hard work and I managed to reach the budget that was needed to produce it. I think it was about 200,000 to produce about 1,000 copies.
Okay.
To
and
get
you
to that
had
level.
really good ownership over the design. Every page
you
could
for sure.
mold exactly
that's
the way you wanted.
That's the great benefit of producing on your own, producing through crowdfunding. Because I worked with a graphic designer. His name is Stefan Hattenbach. He did all of the design in the book. He's an amazing guy, very talented. So it was him and me basically giving birth to this book. And once it started to sell and sell out on the first edition, I was lucky enough to start a partnership with a publishing company that it's called Free Tanke. They are now publishing the book, and they are the ones who published this book.
Nice.
Yeah.
But you could obviously negotiate way better terms because you'd already sold out one.
Yeah, it was a good benefit having the numbers and the facts of sales.
So what changed when a publisher got involved? Why didn't you just print the book again?
It basically became too much work.
To manage all
the sales and all the
sense because you have to actually
I was physically
that's true.
receiving the emails. I was physically sending out the books through the post. It's a lot of work. That's a nice problem, right? Because you're selling
100%. Yeah.
But it was just demanding too much time. And what's also, there's good and bad with everything. What's good about producing your own book is that you have the complete power and freedom of creating it. The downside is that you're not really you cannot really reach out. You don't come into all the bookstores. This book is now in basically every bookstore in Sweden, whereas this one I was struggling in the beginning. Because bookstores are still a great window for the audience.
I'm seeing this signal online, and I have no numbers to back it up. But given a much larger consumption of audiobooks and less of an emphasis on people reading physical books, I think there are less books in people's homes. But books is something that complements a space, is a timeless thing, and it always will be. And so I'm thinking that there could be then a reaction that there is more value being placed on photo books. So if you saw Jimmy Chin, again, Paul Nicklin, in the last few weeks have released a photo book. And I have never noticed before them being publicized so much. From a perspective of someone who's published too, are photo books becoming more popular? And if so, can you charge more for them since they are a piece of art?
I think so. I think coffee table books, as they're called, is kind of, it's not just a trend. It's always been part of a home and interior design to have good coffee table books that you can enjoy for a long time to come. Because they have, it's not like a paperback that you read and then you're done with it, right? A coffee table book, whatever the subject, you can always come back to. And I actually think if you see a negative trends in regular pocket paperback books, you see a positive trend in photography books. I do think that they've come of collector's value and that they've actually increased in sales over the last years. Maybe it's because of there's something different in holding a book in your hand and looking through photos, seeing the photos in real life, than flickering through your phone. It's not the same thing, and I think in that sense, I don't think books will completely disappear. Photographs will always be there and fill a value, I think.
Nice. If the trend is correct, then what you're saying as well.
I could be completely wrong, but yeah, that's my guess.
If it is, then the per book cost will increase because more value will be placed on it, and therefore a book like yours, which is published at the nicest paper, the most attention to that detail, is worth more.
Yeah, some photographers even give out limited edition that we talked about, limited edition books. They only give out perhaps 500 books.
Fuck, that's also quite smart.
And they sell them. I can't recall their name now. They gave out, I think they only made, was it 20 or 30 books? But they each went for 20,000 kroner.
Yeah, smart.
Each book, It's,
Yeah, maybe that's the way to go.
There's a collector's value in there as well, especially 100%. If they're signed.
Artificial scarcity is an amazing thing. Imagine your schedule completely opened up, no obligations, and plus you had all the resources you wanted as well. So you've got time, money, access, a team, everything. What photo do you right now go out and take?
Well, I think the next step for me would be to go into the big blue.
Okay.
That's kind of what's really appealing to me. Yeah. I think there is so much artistic beauty beneath the surface that is just crazy. I mean, it's a different planet, right? And to be able to, I've seen incredibly good underwater photography. I've seen so much good underwater photography. There is incredible photographs out there. But again, going back to what we talked before, to do it in my way, with my voice, that's something I really wanted to discover. So basically, I would go to Papua New Guinea or some remote ocean and just go crazy swimming with whale sharks.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Sharks, I love sharks as well.
You're not intimidated by being in the water?
Well, it depends on which species though, which kind of shark. Maybe a great white I would think twice about, but most sharks are so much friendlier than people think. They're not dangerous at all.
Have you ever been in the water and a giant animal has come up to you?
In the water?
Yeah.
We had an incident. If sitting in a rubber boat is called being in the water, a small rubber boat, Zodiac. I was up in recently in this was Antarctica, and suddenly we were surrounded by 3 humpback whales.
Oh wow!
And they were like just under the boat. A small little rubber boat.
Their tail is a little flick.
Yeah. But they were so gentle, they could have crushed us, you know, if they came up, you know. But they gently swam around the boat, and I even, you know, looked at us. You see this old dinosaur eye popping up from the surface, looking at you.
Amazing.
Incredible moment. I've done cage diving with white sharks. I've seen a 7-meter great white passing through the cage, passing by the cage, and that's also a life-changing moment. I remember feeling when that great white could have just eaten the whole cage if he wanted to.
Really?
But he just looked at me again like that elephant I was talking about, like a probably little sardine, not worth chewing even. So, yeah.
There's something about... I just asked the question because you say diving with whale sharks. As an Australian, I should be better, but I grew up on the coast, so always swimming. And you have a healthy fear of sharks, right? Because once or twice every year on the beaches that I would swim at, someone would get attacked. Not die, but get attacked. And one time I was out there, not surfing, just swimming, but it was quite deep because I went out quite far.
Yeah.
And there was a dolphin, but I didn't know it was a dolphin.
Oh, yeah.
And
how did you react?
I just shat my pants. Yeah. I put my head down and...
You thought it was a great white? Or, yeah.
No, well, yes, I thought, rationally,
Yeah.
I should have known it wasn't, because it was small, but you see a fast shadow under you.
Yeah, wow.
Anyway.
You freeze.
Yeah, but it stuck with me so badly, because how would I react if I was with because off the Ningaloo Reef off Western Australia, it's one of the best places in the world to dive. You got the manta rays, you've got the big whale sharks.
Yeah.
It would be cool to do, but anyway, it's cool to see that you'd go to the ocean. That's a whole nother thing, right? The mechanics of taking a photo underwater.
It's a completely new.
Have you ever tried it?
Never.
Okay.
Never. I do have certificate. I have been diving for many years, but I haven't even taken a photograph with cheap equipment or anything. So there'll be a new world. But I think it's part of the journey. You got to push yourself. You got to learn. Never to be comfortable. I mean, the minute you get comfortable with whatever you do, I think you kind of degrade. You give up. That's why, again, I will never take the best photos because once I say that, I think there cannot be any better photo.
Nice. There's a lot of Nietzsche in you. That's a very, very Nietzschean idea as well. What's a moment in your life that you look back at and just can't believe that you're a part of?
When it comes to photography?
Honestly, anything. I'll give some context and you'll be able to understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There's a moment where a very famous podcast called Lex Friedman is training jiu-jitsu with George St. Pierre, who is one of the best martial artists of all time. Lex Friedman loves martial arts. And it's like, wow, I'm just another guy. How do I get to practice with my hero? A moment you look back on, I can't believe I was a part of that moment. Do you have one of those? I'm pretty, without sounding like some sort of hippie or weirdo, but I do have very spiritual. I'm quite a spiritual guy. So a lot of times I feel like I have some sort of spiritual connection with these animals. And there was one instance. I had a kind of a crisis in my life. Things went bad in all sorts of ways. Tough period in my time. Went down to South Africa, and one evening, I saw a big male lion, and I was just studying it, and it felt like I really felt that connection, like he was talking to me and giving me strength and power. And it's really difficult to put words on these kind of things, but having a spiritual kind of almost a bit religious moment like that is something I cannot believe happened, and really changed me again, because after coming back from that trip, everything changed in my life. Suddenly everything went well, and I felt a whole different level of confidence and well-being in all sorts of ways. So it was very strange and very powerful. And I think, but I look at life and the world
very spiritually. So I guess, I'm open to that sort of energy. I don't know.
Oh, that sounds like an amazing moment.
And another moment was photographing snow leopards in Himalaya. And you're in a group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're lucky to see a snow leopard, like usually it's kilometers away through binocular, patrolling the ridges of the mountains. And one day we saw a snow leopard. He was walking that way on a ridge, and I knew that earlier that day, down in a valley behind that ridge, we had seen some blue sheep grazing. So I thought, I'll bet my life that snow leopard is heading that direction. It was getting late, and so I actually separated from the guides and the groups, and I was on my own. Went over to that valley, and it was like going down to -20, -30 degrees perhaps, and I was just laying there waiting, looking at the blue sheep, and suddenly they all froze, and I knew something was about to happen. And the seconds later, the snow leopard came attacking the blue sheep. They got away, and there was a moment when the dust settles, and he just stands there and looks me straight into the eyes. And it was just me. I mean, it's almost impossible to see a snow leopard that close. That was also a spiritual moment.
How close were you?
Less than 100 meters. I would say 50 to 70. Hard to approximate the exact, but it was very close, and I could see his eyes. I was that close. Then he walked up a little cliff. He was sitting there, looking out over the mountains, and he didn't leave. He was just sitting there letting me photograph him for like an hour or so.
Wow.
Usually they're very elusive. They just take off when they see somebody. But he didn't mind me. It was also some sort of spiritual encounter, I feel. And I do think, it sounds a bit weird, and it sounds a bit out there to have such a claim, but I think that's why people love animals. That's what makes people so happy when they come, for example, to Africa and they see an elephant or a lion. There is a spiritual connection for everyone, because they're relatives, and so I think it makes sense.
That's a beautiful moment to end on, but we'll finish with a few more though. But that's fantastic. Did you get the clear shot? Was it in focus?
It's in that book.
Okay, I gotta look at it.
Yeah, we can look later. Yeah.
That's amazing though. Have you seen The Secret Life of Walter Mitty?
Nope.
Okay, you gotta watch it, because at the end... The Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Okay.
Amazing movie if you have some sort of travel lust. At the end, it's about a photographer.
Right.
He gets this shot of a snow leopard.
Oh, really?
And it sounds a lot like the experience you went to.
Really?
So I think you'll get a kick out of that.
I'll put it on my list.
But it doesn't sound like crazy or hippie at all to have that sort of spiritual connection to an animal. If you like myself, kind of believe in the story of evolution, that we are all somehow stardust. We're all just the next generation down from some lineage. Then the only thing that separates us from most of the animals is levels of intelligence and physical traits. But there is certainly emotion there.
I think so. Yeah.
Humans are extremely emotional, so we can sense emotion in other animals. Like you say, everyone goes to Africa. You came in, my cat immediately came and started, giving you attention.
Yeah.
That's obviously an emotional animal.
Exactly.
So, it doesn't sound crazy to me at all.
Yeah.
I think I had a very similar experience with this gibbon that I was explaining.
Oh, yeah, you told me that. Yeah. No, it's...
do you have a favorite photo, both of yours, but then of someone else?
Ooh. I think the snow leopard is special. That's not a photo that I might be gonna sell a lot of, but probably one of the photos that I'm the most proud of because of the story, because of that spiritual connection. So I would say it's definitely one of my top photos. And what was your second question?
Of someone else.
Of someone else. Let me think about that one, and we'll come back to it. That's a difficult question to just when you haven't thought about it.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many.
Yeah, well, let it sit with you while we talk about Here Forever and Smart Savannahs, but mostly Smart Savannahs.
Yeah.
And the reason why I wanted to leave it to the end is not because it's an afterthought, but because everything we've said so far is part of the context of then what that is to you and the organization itself. So talk about it.
Well, Smart Savannahs initially was named Project Ngulia. It was, to make a long story short, it actually started with, if we go back years, back to 2013, I believe it was, terror attack in Nairobi, where a bunch of people was killed in a shopping mall in Nairobi. So the FBI was asked to develop surveillance technology to be able to fight the terrorists in Kenya in a more efficient way. And that intelligent cameras, etc., was developed through that project. And then the same guy, one of the guys behind it, thought of the idea: why can't we use this technology on surveilling and protecting wildlife? So he had a friend at Linköping University here in Sweden, a researcher, and together they developed kind of groundbreaking technology in many ways, involving apps that rangers can use, to report where the animals are and how they move, intelligent cameras, GPS sensors that can be transplanted into that can be, what do you call it, fixated in the rhino horns, so they can be tracked and protected that way. So they developed all this kind of technology, and that's been going on now in West Tsavo in Kenya since 2013. And now that all of the technology is developed, and the ideas are on the table, the goal is to apply many parks in Kenya, ultimately all over Africa, with these technical innovations for free. But to do that, we need the hardware, right? We need mobile phones, we need cameras, we need devices, the hardware. And for that, they were asked to start an organization to support that work. Fredrik Gustafsson, who is the chief researcher in Linköping University, approached me if I would be interested to be the president of this new organization, or the NGO rather. And as you can hear from what I've been telling today, a lot of my interest, a lot of the purpose with my photography is at the end of the day for it to lead to protecting animals for conservation. So I was very honored to be asked to be the president of this new organization. So this is and thereby the name Smart Savannahs. We basically, I also talked about earlier about the hardships and the difficulties of these anti-poaching crews. They're on foot, they have nothing. They have a gun, they have a torch. To be able to equip these guys and also make the parks smarter with cameras that can detect whether it's animals or people not allowed, people moving in the park, those kind of innovations. So that's the goal, to equip more parks in Africa, and it's a great mission. It's a great idea, and I think it's necessary. For so many years, we have used technology the other way to spread our civilization, to encroach the natural habitats. I think it's really about time that we use our big brains for something progressive, something that actually helps the natural world. Because if we can destroy it with our minds, with our intelligent brain, we can also help it, right? So technology in the future is the way forward for wildlife conservation, and must be. So that's the ambition. And we just started about 2 months ago. I have a big exhibition now at the Natural History Museum in Stockholm.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, you must check it out.
Yeah, I have to.
Yeah, it's called The Thin Line.
Okay.
About 30 big prints there.
Perfect.
Yeah, you must see it. So so that's where we launched the organization, and yeah, it's going really well. Getting a lot of great feedback, and many big plans ahead.
You need to raise money to buy the hardware.
Yeah.
So how much money? Is there a goal of money you need?
Well, you know, we want to equip. Right now, we have equipped Anguilla, which is a reserve within West Savo.
Mm.
Second goal, like I said, is to spread this technology and apply it in other parks. So we already have a set-up deal with Nairobi National Park and other areas of West Savo. If you take Nairobi National Park, for example, that will cost about 200,000 Swedish kroner, about 20,000 euros to equip that entire reserve with this technology. And so we're not talking about a lot of money.
No, I mean that's change for most NGOs, right?
Yeah. And what's good about, I think, this project as well is, you know, the parks in Africa that suffer from low budgets and poor economy, they will get the technology and the innovations for free. Mm-hmm. We're not going to charge the parks in Africa for giving them our technology. All we need is the hardware. So that's where the work is at now.
Well, it sounds like a brilliant project, and from my understanding, so it's new hardware and software specifically engineered to just have better surveillance of the park.
And the rangers.
Yeah. And that helps with anti-poaching. Like that's the ultimate goal. To curtail the poaching.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I am surprised there isn't already.
There is. It's not. But there's different quality of this kind of technological innovations. You know, and what Frederick has developed at Linköping is quite groundbreaking because it's so much user friendlier. You have problem with battery times. You have problems when you set up cameras in the wild. You know, a lot of times they only work for a few days or a few weeks, and then you have to find the camera and charge it again. So they have developed many ideas for making these innovations more effective.
Nice.
And
well, that's magnificent.
State of the art in many ways. Yeah.
And as technology compounds on itself and improves, your access to it will become easier and cheaper.
Yeah, that too.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
And so this print was 50 euros, which I suppose you're selling all over the world, right?
Right. Yeah, that's meant to support that cost.
And all of it goes to the Smart Savannahs cause. So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to hang a potentially soon to be extinct species of rhino on your wall?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty good allocation of capital.
That's a low cost for such a.
And you signed
cost.
it too.
I signed it with a silver pen in the corner. So
nice. Yeah. Okay, so Swedish collaboration with the park. I forget what it's called.
And with Kenya Wildlife Services.
Kenya Wildlife. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's a cool thing as well. You know, that this technology, this idea comes from my home country.
Yeah.
We're a pretty small country, but we're good at technology, and so I'm especially proud of that.
Mate, Bjorn.
It's not a global...
Sweden is such a phenomenal country. I get, from what you just said, I get the sense that you know this and appreciate this, but there's 10, 11 million people here.
Yeah, it's a very small country.
You sit at the top of so many distributions in terms of business.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane, the type of business that comes out of this country. It's super interesting. It's something I really want to get to the bottom of.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me. You know? Northvolt, IKEA, Vattenfall, Spotify, Klarna.
Yeah.
You know, that's just the recent sort of innovations. Hasselblad, you know, at the top of the photography game.
Yeah.
I forget the audio company, but there's this audio company that's at the top of the game.
Right.
Somehow Sweden make and produce the best of whatever their field is in.
Yeah.
And it's a small population. So that's remarkable.
It is for sure.
But yeah, okay. Fascinating. Well, I'm keen to see how that progresses.
Yeah, it's in the start, so ask me again in about a year and I will give you a full report.
Perfect.
But
and that brings us to the final two questions which I've asked every guest that's come on the show. So it's not photography related.
Yeah.
The first is, what country are you most bullish on? So, you know what I mean by bullish, right?
Like look down or
no,
criticize.
opposite. You think they will. This is like investing bullish and bearish.
Oh, okay.
If you're bullish in a company, you think it's going to go through the roof. If you're bearish, the opposite. So a country you look at that you think, wow, they've got a really good future ahead of them.
Very good question. Financially, or
no.
Could it be anything?
Anything. Well, not anything. It's the whole package.
Yeah.
A country you think has a really good future ahead of it.
That's a really tough one. I always felt that Canada is doing an amazing job. That's like, if I wouldn't live in Sweden, I would definitely consider Canada being perhaps one of those countries because of everything from the mentality of Canadians, how friendly they are, and close connection to nature and wildlife. They seem to have a very sound relationship to nature and wildlife and everything, and also politically, the way they run their country is, I guess, in a way close to Sweden, which is also a role model when it comes to equal treatment of people, equal politics, equal standards. And I think that's necessary because, if you look into the future, obviously it's the biggest threat to the planet is the way we consume, the way we produce. So the old school capitalism, I think, must be replaced by some. That doesn't make me a communist, but we need to see a new form of capitalism, a capitalism that actually regards nature and wildlife, and few countries, I think, have that idea better than others. Canada, Sweden being some of them. Yeah,
there's loads of synergies between Sweden and Canada.
Yeah. But a sound relationship to the economy, to capitalism, I think will be the most successful countries in the future.
Yeah.
Because if we don't do anything about what's going on with the environment, that will be strike back 100 million times.
Yeah.
So it is about money.
That
saving the planet.
if only it could be one country or a group of countries that could solve a global issue. But just the tragic reality is everybody's got to work together. And that's historically unprecedented.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah.
Finally, if you could witness a conversation between any two people, so listen to a podcast, dead or alive, no language barrier, who would you listen to?
That would be that's a tricky one as well. No, it would definitely be between you and Sir David Attenborough.
Between me
and David Attenborough.
Wow.
That should be on your list, mate.
That's some serious pressure. I would be thrilled to talk to the guy.
Yeah. I mean, he was my childhood hero, so I would love to, not to hear him talk about monkeys or spiders, but to have him talking about his personal life. That would be very, very
interesting.
My God,
that would be amazing.
Yeah.
He is, a wealth of knowledge. I wonder why he hasn't done it. Maybe it's just, he's 90 something, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully
he's
he comes around.
Tired of media, and maybe he's too old to.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Because there are giant podcasts out there where he could add value. He could promote something and millions of people would listen.
Yeah.
Hopefully it happens before.
But he doesn't even have email, so probably
exactly.
You would have to call him on an old phone that you.
He's not going to do a Zoom. We'd have to go over there, but that would be great.
Yeah.
Well, Bjorn, this was a real pleasure.
Yeah, for me too. Yeah, great questions.
It's way better to do it in person. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, me too. Very nice talking to you.
Well, that was absolutely terrific. Cheers, Bjorn. An absolute pleasure to sit down with you. I really encourage everyone out there to purchase Beauty Will Save the World, because not only would it just make the most perfect gift for a person, which Christmas has now expired, so perhaps it's the wrong time, but nonetheless, not only would it make the perfect gift for a person, but much of the proceeds goes towards the Smart Savannahs project. So it's actually money for a really good cause as well. I get so inspired by these wildlife photographers, kind of like what I said at the beginning. They just take off to the most remote corners of the globe and then get intimate time with these animals and access that they wouldn't have otherwise if they didn't have a camera hanging around their neck. I think it really is just the most amazing thing. But if you stuck around till now, then you're an absolute legend. So cheers for doing so. But I also assume that perhaps you might have enjoyed the conversation, unless you are masochistic and just want to continue with the pain. Either way, you both qualify for making a review of the podcast. And so that's kind of what I want to speak about now. I want to corner the podcast market for eclectic curiosities in really whatever country that it is you're listening in from. Now, discoverability with all these podcast algorithms sucks. It is just shite. It's in the Stone Age. The one variable that they're noticing is the amount of reviews and 5 stars that are attached to the certain podcasts in the different distributions. So most of you are going to be listening on Apple Podcasts, but if you're not, there's still a way to leave a review. So I urge you, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, that if you have listened to this stage, there is really nothing more helpful you could do for me. So if you're keen as a bean and okay with supporting me, then pump your good juice into the algorithm and have it pumped via 5 stars and a nice, healthy, juicy review. It really does make all the difference. And I hope you guys enjoyed that one. I'm going to have on a series of wildlife photographers and also National Geographic photographers coming on as well. So, gear up for that. Hopefully you're keen. But that's all. Nice reviews. Thanks for sticking around. You're a bunch of legends. Take it easy. Ciao.